Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here tonight. From the outset, let me make it clear, I'm all for doing things smarter, and I'm all for doing things with less inputs, and for us to have good, clean, reliable, affordable energy for people. Do I think wind turbines are the answer to this problem that we face? After 4 years of looking into this and 9 months of being a senator, no, I don't. I've attempted on numerous occasions, more than I care to tell you, ask questions, look things up, and it doesn't add up. Like, I'm a boilermaker blacksmith by trade, and I deal in figures and measurements, and people say to me, I want a bridge, I want a shed, I want something made, and I've got to make it to what the people want. So I've got to give them a tangible things. You know, I deal in practical reality, and the practical reality of what I've found is that there's a lot of people out there who are affected by wind farms, whether wind turbines, whether people like to admit it or not. I know people who've got wind farms not far from their homes, people that I've known the vast majority of my life, good people, very hard-working people, people on the land, people on small blocks. And, you know, these people are not political activists, they're not reactionary, they're just people that want to be left alone and do their work, and they're tormented and they're becoming refugees in their own country. They can't live in their homes. You may have seen an ad on the TV recently, it was running up here. I noticed one night when I came back to the hotel from the Senate, and it shows you the Hepburn Wind Farm in Victoria, the community wind farm. And there's 2 towers there, just 2. And I know this lady and her husband, as I said, I've known them the majority of my life. And this woman looks 20 years older than her husband now. And as I said, the lady works in the hospital in Daylesford. They're very hard-working people. They've got a few, you know, 5-6 acres, their home. He's a woodcutter. And she's one of the domestic staff in the hospital. This woman is absolutely tormented by the things, and she's got 2 of them near her. There's only 2 turbines. There's another lady I know who's got a small shop in Daylesford, and she lives, I'd say, 500 metres, 600 metres from one of the turbines. And this woman moved to Daylesford. It was her first home she'd ever owned. It was her dream. Bush block, you know, bit of paddock and on the edge of the Wombat State Forest. You know, everything she's ever had has gone into this property. She's got a small business in Daylesford. She is beside herself. A very good friend of mine knows her, and he said, look, you know, Jan's, you know, distraught John. So anyway, I'd heard that over time, and I'd followed her letters in the paper. Anyway, one day I said to my mate, I said, give us Jan's number and, you know, I'll give her a call. So I went out there, and I'd been out there on a number of occasions prior to this, and I parked at various points around her property. And to be honest, I never heard a thing. Nights on the way home from my workshop, I'd call it, you know, pull up on the side of the road, different spots, different locations, on the Great Dividing Range, on the side of the Great Dividing Range, behind a house on the road, all that, and I never heard a thing. So I thought, well, is it, you know, psychosomatic, is it? But anyway, I went in and I said to her, look, Jan, I've been out here on numerous occasions and I haven't heard a thing. Anyway, I said, look, here's my home phone number. I said, feel free to call me anytime, day or night, I'll come out. Anyway, 2 weeks went by, I get a phone call. It's a Sunday night. Just got the kids to bed, and the phone rings and it's her, and she's absolutely distraught. I drive out to her property and I pull up on the side of a house closest to the turbine thinking that that's where I'd hear this shocking noise, and I didn't hear a thing. Anyway, she came out and she's visibly distraught, and I said, well, Jan, I can't hear anything here. And she says, come with me. And I walked to the other side of the house, about 30 feet from where I parked the ute, got out of the ute again. My God, could I hear it. Now, that was what I could hear. And in her house, she has this incessant noise the whole time. And yet, this woman is derided. This woman is attacked for being a fruit loop. Doesn't know what she's talking about, it's all psychosomatic, feeding off the fears of others. Well, let me tell you, it's not in her head, it's real. Now, whether that noise I can hear would drive you around the twist, it's not that's what's driving you around the twist, it's this low frequency buzzing that continually goes on in her ears, and she's not the only one. Now, I've held public meetings on wind farms. I've held them in Clare in South Australia, I've held them in Boorowa in South Australia, I've held them in Buninyong in Victoria, just outside Ballarat. I've had one in Yass. We've had another one at Mount Gambier recently with Nick, and you hear the same things. I can tell you at Warborough, visited people there. This is years ago, I might add, years ago. Different days, different weather conditions, different topography of the land. We hear, you'll quite often hear, there is no peer-reviewed literature, there is no peer-reviewed report, or whatever they want to call it. Well, of course, if you don't investigate, you're not going to end up with anything that's peer-reviewed. I've often thought that these, the proponents of these wind turbines would be tripping over themselves to prove these people wrong with the literature, the data, the figures, the recordings, whatever. But you can't seem to get it. It's commercial in confidence. There's far more questions than there are answers. And I've said it once and I'll say it again, I'll be the first bloke to stand up in Parliament and say I'm wrong. I hope to God I am wrong. But I have seen nothing that would placate me. I've seen nothing that I can confidently say to people with a true heart that, I can say, look, there's nothing there. And, and I've travelled many, many kilometres with these things, and I also want to add, I'm all for jobs in regional and rural Australia. I'm a vehement proponent of Australian-owned and Australian-made. I want jobs for people. I want people to have a sense of self-worth and gainful employment. Well, may I say to you, there may be some people who are getting jobs out of it, but at what cost? Senators, members of Parliament, councillors, members of State Parliament, they are elected by people. We are not elected by corporations. Our job is to look after people, to enhance people's lives, not make it tougher. It's not up to us. If we don't want to do our job, we shouldn't abdicate our responsibility to the people. It's people we're talking about, first and foremost, and it's people being driven off their land. I could tell you story after story, and these people, pardon my French, are not bullshit artists. They are fair dinkum, hard-working people. And they can't live in the properties that have been in their family for generations. And how anybody cannot have empathy with these people is beyond me. Anyway, look, I think I've said enough. But, as I said, I'd be happy to be proven wrong. And I'll stand up in Parliament and say, look, I got it wrong if I did. But I think I'm on pretty safe ground. There is something definitely wrong here. And, you know, I've got, and I also want to add, I've got friends who've got turbines, I've got friends who want turbines, and I've got friends that despise turbines. So it places me in an awkward position where some of my best mates want to sign up for turbines. What I fear most is that they will come to me in the not too distant future when it's affecting their children when they move back to their properties. As their parents pass on and they return to the family homestead, it will affect them. I worry about the contracts that people sign. You know, I'm not a barrister, that's Peter's gig. But I can tell you what, I wouldn't sign half of these contracts they're signing. You know, common sense says to me, there's something wrong when you've got to sign, you know, these clauses of commercial in confidence or gag clauses. You know, what have they got to hide? You know, and you'll often hear about, oh, the experience in Germany or Holland or someplace overseas. Well, the first thing is, they're nowhere near the size of the ones we're talking about here. The other thing is that, you know, the ones here are far bigger. The other thing is, if you say we've got people who are complaining of a problem, well, there may well be an engineering solution to the problem. But if you're not prepared to even look at it, you're never going to find a solution to the problem. You know, and there's hundreds of millions of dollars of people's superannuation being poured into these things. You know, they're worried about what's happening in Greece, we're worried about what's happening in Europe, and we've got a bloody disaster on our own doorstep potentially. What's going to happen? Like, who's going to pick it up? It's going to be all of us. We're the ones who are going to have to pick up this calamity when the boat comes into port. And who's going to pick it up? The poor mug punter. And people, like, we've got the business with Craig Thompson, which quite frankly is a smokescreen. But they don't want to talk about the real issues. And we have potentially a real disaster waiting here to happen. And it's going to fall onto all of us to pick up the pieces. And they ought to be worried about the poor people who, you know, hard-earned superannuation's going into these things. You know, I pose the question, is it a calamity going to happen? When is it going to happen? You know, it may well be fine to stick them out in the middle of nowhere, but they're not sticking them out in the middle of nowhere. They're sticking them around where there is quite a few people living. And I've heard all the arguments that it's only the people who aren't getting a quid out of it. Well, let me tell you, I've spoken to people who do get a quid out of it, but because they've signed these clauses, God knows who was giving them their legal advice, but they're frightened. They can't say anything. They're frightened of losing their properties. I've got people I've spoken to, very hard-nosed business people, who are quite happy to make a quid, and they said to me, I wouldn't sign this in a pink fit, they said. They said, I cannot understand for the life of me why my neighbour has signed away their property rights, signed away their family's rights. They've said to me, their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren are going to say, what the hell were you thinking about? Anyway, I've spoken enough. I thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I wish you all the very best, and if there's anything can ever do to assist you, please feel free to give us a call. Thank you.